Director of Athletics, Mack Rhoades, joining Paul Catalina, Craig Smoke, and David Smoke as we continue now on this Wednesday, March the 22nd. Mack Rhoades with us. Mack, thank you very much. How many times since the last time you joined us on this show have you really missed us?
Every day. Every day I think about the three of you. How about that?
That's the first time you've never told the truth on this show at all, ever. First time, what? The first time ever. So how different is it because of the both the women and out who played really well against UConn, the men out with Creighton? What's it like to not have both of them still playing?
Yeah, it's different. You know, I was talking to somebody earlier. And we actually had a conversation about it today in our executive team meeting. Just perspective and again trying to at least remember that we're one of a few schools. There's not many where both programs go to the NCAA regularly, and I think the good news is both have set such a high standard that if you don't get beyond the first two rounds, there's some disappointment, and I know both of the coaches are disappointed, but yet proud of the team, proud of their staff, proud of our student athletes. But we've set a high standard, and we're going to continue to not back away from that standard, and I think the really positive and great news are both programs. I really believe have great futures in front of them, and with great leaders, and so I'm excited about it. Absolutely, would love to still be playing. Would love for both to still be playing, and again, that's been our standard, and we're going to work really, really hard. Both programs are to make sure that we achieve beyond the first rounds when we think about the future of both programs.
When you were in Kansas City, obviously with all the Big 12 there, and then also when you were in Denver with the NCAA with different programs from different conferences there, how much was there, if anything at all, discussion about today in college athletics, and even a lot about the realignment or future and additions that the Big 12, if they have them, are around the table?
Yeah, so I appreciate the question because as you travel, you certainly run into other athletic directors or senior administrators, and I did have quite a few conversations with others, and I think everybody, at least the people that I talk to are really grappling with name, image, and likeness, and feels like that has become a priority in everybody's life, and how do you deal with that, and particularly how do you deal with it if you're an institution that maybe doesn't have a large alumni base. You're a private institution, and by the way, there's some pretty well known brand public institutions that it's been hard, and so I think that's the topic of conversation amongst everybody. At least it starts there, and then some of the other NCAA deregulation, and then obviously we were out in Denver, just a few minutes away from Boulder, and so that was a topic of conversation, specifically as it pertains to Colorado, and certainly the Pac-12, and I had an opportunity to at least visit with the Denver Post and have some conversation, and again, nothing's changed, and we certainly wish the Pac-12 the very, very best, and if it doesn't turn out like they want it to, we'll be prepared.
Mac, by the way, just real quick, Juan on the chat room is a Houston fan. He wants to thank you for hiring Kelvin Sampson when you were there. He brought that up, so thought I would mention that to you. But did you notice, we had John Gallagher, who used to be the coach at Hartford, on earlier, and he said that he noticed something watching the tournament, that he felt teams were kind of coming for the Big 12 because of the success. And two of the last three national champions and the team that played in the national championship. Do you feel that a little bit? Maybe not just as Baylor, a team that won the national championship a couple years ago, but as the conference now when you're watching games?
Yeah, I really do. That's a great point. And, I think when you win a national championship, right, you have a target on your jersey. And I think, Baylor certainly felt that way. And I'm sure Kansas does as well. All of the past winners. But I think going into the tournament, because of how much recognition, the Big 12 received during the season. And, again, I realize that I'm probably biased, but, I try to listen pretty carefully. And I think it was unanimous. I'm not sure that I heard, one person that follows college basketball say anything but the Big 12 is by far the best conference this year. And so I do think that, there's been a target on the Big 12 and the Big 12 schools. And, so much of this is about matchups and who you play and when you get to play and how healthy you are, et cetera. But, look, the Big 12, I think is had a good tournament. We've got two in the Sweet 16 when we think about the men and both of them have a legitimate chance, just like the other 14. And you could probably talk a little bit about Alabama and Houston, assuming that both Sasser and Shedd are healthy. Maybe being ahead of the pack a little bit, but then the other 14, it's really anybody's tournament.
Mack, what did you think as that Creighton game unfolded? I mean, you can point to matchup there. They also were obviously incredibly hot shooting, and some of the issues that the Bears have had crept up in that game as well. Just your thoughts on what's to come and what you saw this year and just the way that it ended.
Yeah, one, I thought Creighton was a really really talented team, and a little bit similar to North Carolina, last year, where they were probably, underseeded. They had a tough stretch when their big man was out and struggled through that stretch, and then he returns to the lineup, and all of a sudden they're really really good. And that's not to make any excuses. I think Ken Palm had them ranked 12th, and we were ranked 13th, I believe it was. But a really good team. I think everybody focused on them offensively, but if I'm not mistaken, they were the number one team defensively in the Big East, and I thought they really really guard well, and I think they have as good a chance as anybody to get to the Final Four. And then I think for us, and I really don't think Coach Drew would mind me saying this. We've certainly talked about it. It wasn't the typical Baylor team defensively. Mm-hmm. And I think we had one or two games, maybe three or four, where defensively it really felt like teams of the recent past. But other than that, we weren't as good defensively, and the numbers don't lie. I think it's been since maybe 2008, 2009, and so that's that really next year I know will be a primary area of focus. Again, offensively, statistically, one of the best in the country, if not the best. But I thought that just again the defensive side of the ball, and when you think about toughness and we talk about it, toughest team wins. Well, that's really that comes from the defensive side of the ball and how hard you play, and how well you rebound, etc. So we'll get better there. There's no doubt in my mind, and we'll get back to what we're used to seeing when we think about how we play defensively.
Mack, there was the story about the Big 12 closing in on the data rights deal. Do you have one now, or is this something different that will also produce additional revenue? And how many, if you were to, like, off the top of your head, how many ideas are on the cusp of happening within the Big 12 when it comes to revenue that Brett Yormark and company are putting together?
Yeah. So we don't have a data deal as we speak today. We've got a couple offers that I think are really really good offers, and that would equate to additional revenue for all of the members. And so we'll wade through that and see where we land and which one's best for the conference. And then there's a lot of different ideas floating around, and it's what I appreciate about the commissioner and his staff, that there's always ideas percolating, and many of them certainly are focused on growing revenue for the conference, but also how do we do some things that are better for our student athletes, and so some of those things as well. There's certainly talk about how do we brand ourselves internationally, which again is another pathway when we think about revenue, but then also doing some things that maybe help brand our conference, like the Pro Day with the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's great news for our student athletes, and I think it's great news for our brand and being affiliated with the NFL and being the first conference to do something like that. So there's no shortage of ideas.
With his focus as well on basketball, we know he's brought up Gonzaga. That's not a secret. We've asked you about it. And with the Big 12, I think the SEC challenge is over. Is that right? The Big 12 SEC basketball challenge, is that?
Yeah, that will subside. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a chance, based on the commitment to basketball, that the Big 12 could host their own, like, in-season or preseason NIT type of thing to bring in even more revenue?
Yeah, I think we certainly could have some conversation without putting the cart before the horse, but having conversation about a fall classic, having a conversation about playing basketball somewhere internationally. I think all of those things are on the table, and all of those are conversations with our TV partners. Those are all ideas that we're talking about.
Mack, when it comes to the data deal, and other leagues are considering these things and doing them as well, how much of this will be prepared, and again, this is something the NCAA and member institutions will have to wrap their arms around too, towards gambling or available to those companies, or are we not ready to have that discussion yet?
Yeah, so I think that's how the data will be used primarily. But this is what's so interesting, and it's a fascinating world when we think about gambling on college sports athletics and where it's headed. And I apologize that I'm not better prepared, but it's the last I remember, it's like legal in 33 states, something like that approximately. And there's, at the time there were 6 or 7 or 8 going through the legislative system, and then a handful of other states that are certainly considering it. And so this collection of data, it's happening already. and so all of the betting gambling entities are gathering and getting this data without anybody in between. And what this does is it organizes it, and I think it protects you as a conference, and provides some consistency to it. And so by signing a deal with, in terms of giving them the data, it's not new data. It's data that people are already getting. We're just now giving it to an in-between to distribute the data, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I've had a couple of people ask me, when you look at streaming like ESPN Plus, which is the ESPN Plus is something that, like, for example, when Baylor has games on campus that are ESPN Plus, a lot of times that's your school that is producing that game. Is that something you do that and don't make revenue off of that? Or is that something that, because of the Tier 3 rights, ESPN pays? Who pays for the actual broadcast and, for example, the production cost or talent?
Yeah, no, that's really, really a good question. So, and there's some nuances to it, but in general, when you think about the talent, ESPN is certainly providing and paying for the talent. When you think about the production, whether they bring in a truck or not, they usually are paying for production. When we produce something ourselves for distribution digitally, and certainly I think will come a day when we'll have the capability of producing something for linear broadcast. There can be a subsidy that we receive. I think where we're headed is, with the proliferation of digital and just more events, we're going to have to grow our in-house production where we can do multiple events at the same time. We don't have that capability as we speak now, but here, when we open up the pavilion, we will have that capability. And so we're investing in production room and studio. But there is certainly there is a cost to the institution, and that is part of the third tier rights.
Dave Aranda yesterday met with the media, Mack Rhoades, Baylor Director of Athletics, after practice as spring drills have begun. He gave an answer to a question about how, in fact, did he look at himself and or what may have not gone quite right last year. And he kept kind of alluding to some things as far as the give and take with players or coaches even last year during the season. His answer, though, when he said that he was probably at times too lenient, that maybe even players at some point maybe took advantage of that, and that how honest he was with his answer that I don't think you would hear very many times from coaches. That's something we've seen a lot from him. Did you know that even before you hired him?
Yeah, I mean, I felt it. I felt it just through the interview process and the person that he is, and the things that I'd heard about him, and I got to spend some time with him on the phone, and we've talked about the process that we use, and I was able to be on the phone with him for a while, just him and I one-on-one, before we did any type of in-person interview. And so that certainly came out. I felt like we talked about it, this combination of intellect and humility and self-awareness, and he scores really, really high in all three of those, and so he's grown. He is such a different, better leader than he was when we hired him in January 2020. He's going to be a better head coach this year than he was last year. And he's learning. And, it's one of the things that we've talked about. And, he's right. There was probably, some moments or incidences where, he was probably, and when I say lenient, it was more about caring about players. It wasn't, allowing misconduct,
Right.
but maybe giving some chances, or maybe not being as firm as what he needed to be. And I think that also, happened with staff, a couple different times. There's a reason why there's been changes to our staff. So I way appreciate him. And I appreciate the fact that we can sit and have real conversations. And I don't think that happens every place with every coach. We can sit down and have real conversations about what's good, what's bad, what areas, that he excels in, what areas he needs to grow in. And by the way, I want him to do the same thing with me as well. So he's really special in that way. And I think one of the beginning part of your question was, how often does that happen in our industry? I would say not very, and particularly being vulnerable and transparent about it.
Mack, he also we talked about this earlier. He kind of touched on something I think a lot of people maybe don't know, is that he's kind of telling you can't coach everybody the same way. You can't lead everybody the same exact way. And that's a kind of a key thing in leadership, is that you can't just broad rubber stamp everything and say this is how it is for everyone, because people respond to different techniques. Is that something you do look for in head coaches, in staff, and what you look for when you're hiring someone?
Yeah, I think that, I think there's a balance. I think you look for somebody that has what I would call principles, guiding principles, philosophy, right, that you're always going to adhere to throughout. But within those guiding principles, I think you have flexibility to handle situations differently and or individuals differently, because, again, as you mentioned, not everybody's the same. Not everybody, responds in the same way. And so you have to know that. And you have to have a relationship and know that person well enough as to, how do they best respond when they're receiving, feedback. And so, yeah, I think that's a part of coaching, and this is an interesting time to be a coach. I think it's probably the most challenging time ever to be a coach. And where I get a little bit worried sometimes is, I want our coaches to be able to understand that there's different maybe ways to lead different people, and it can't be necessarily the same way for everyone. But what I don't want to have happen is where our standards begin to migrate and match up in terms of our student athlete standards, right? Because they're 18 to 22 year old, and I'm not, I say that respectfully. I want our student athletes migrating toward our head coaches' standards, right? and that our coaches do a really good job of saying, hey, no, this is the standard. These are the standards. And, I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's where we got to be really, really careful. We have to, as an athletic department, as a head coach, you have to have your standards, and make sure that everybody understands them.
Mack, on the subject of head coaches, I mean, I know there's a lot going on right now, so I'm just kind of scatter shooting here, but you just had your women's tennis coach win his 500th match. Softball coach Glenn Moore yesterday wins his 1,000th game. Be remiss to not mention women's basketball, a tough loss to UConn, but a thrilling first-round victory over Alabama when they could have absolutely have thrown in the towel after the first quarter, the way that started. There's a lot going on, and we've touched on a couple of those things, but anything you'd like to just highlight or anything in particular from the last week that stands out amongst the various successes and whatnot?
Well, I just think really excited for both Joey and Glenn. Joey's 500th and Glenn's 1,000th, and that speaks to just the incredible job that they've done, and I think more importantly how they do it, and I think what's cool when you talk to both of them, the first thing they say is they deflect and they talk about how blessed they've been to work with some really good people, great people, and that they don't achieve any of those things without them. And so, I think that's really, really awesome. Track and field indoor a couple weeks ago. Coach Ford, second year. The men finished 17th, the top 20 finish, and its best finish since 2011, and just really proud of him as he grows, again, being a first-time head coach and learning and navigating all of that, and his staff and those student athletes. And then, I think lastly, finally, Coach Collin, I love her. I love her for the person she is. I love her for the way she leads our young women, and she is a heck of a basketball coach. I think you saw the way the team competed against UConn, and I thought it was interesting, Gino's comments afterwards in terms of one of the most gratifying wins he's ever had in that building, and I think he knew that he had a team that probably had quite a bit more talent and really was in a battle, and I think that program, our women's basketball program, has such great upside and a great future as we look ahead. So really, really proud, and I'll just say in closing, when we think about our coaches and all of them. I don't want to leave anybody out, but I personally think we have the best collection of head coaches in the entire country.
Mack, if you don't mind, one more question about a coach, because you hired him. Paul brought this up with Kelvin Sampson, and you hired him when a lot of others were not. He then spent time in the NBA after he got himself involved in the NCAA investigation. What was it about him that you believed in him, that he's done what he's done at Houston since you hired him back in 2014?
Trying to reflect back, I think, the things that stand out for me is, one, the issues that he had with the NCAA and again, not making excuses for this part of the story. All of those things are legal. It was phone calls and text messages, and those are things that are all legal now. But he completely owned those. Completely owned it, and he never once told me, oh, by the way, Mac, those are legal now.
Yeah.
Because when I interviewed, they were. And he never made that an excuse, okay? He just, bottom line, owned it and said it was wrong for me to do. I think, his legacy, his family name was really, really important to him. And at the time that I hired, when you Googled his name, there wasn't a lot of positive. It was just most recent, the things that happened at Oklahoma and in Indiana. And then I just knew that he really, really cared about kids. He cared about them way deeper, way beyond, the basketball floor. But he also understood too that there was probably a certain type of young man that could play for him. Not everybody could. And I think, probably pre-NBA, he was as good as anybody in the country defensively. If you played Oklahoma, you were in a battle. But I thought the NBA was, kind of completed him, if you would say, as a head coach on the offensive side of the ball and offensive philosophy. I think that really changed him and made him a complete coach. And then I think finally, I just knew and felt it, that he would never ever take for granted this second chance. I could feel that. He would make the very most of it and not take it for granted. And he's I believe this, truly believe this. He's the second best coach in the country, and we've got Coach Drew is the best. He's the second best, and I'll be rooting for them now that Baylor's not in the tournament.
Mack, thank you very much for your time. Great to have you back on the show. Enjoy getting decompression after all the travel, and I know you still have some more to go, but thank you very much for your time.
Well, and I did miss you, the three of you, maybe not every day, but most of the time.
I don't know if I believe most of the time.
I think
like there might have been a moment